Can you elaborate your theory about Gen Z?
This time it's worse. There are a lot of reports of Gen Z being laid off, and I've noticed in places where things should have been safe, them standing up and having quite negative, strongly negative words about the new generation. There's some companies who, because of AI, because of other reasons, because of the generational gap, they are not hiring new people anymore.
Gen Z, you think they are more Agiles rather than us?
New people have grown up receiving daily updates on their phone. They don't even see that they receive an update. I remember me having to confirm the first time I got a smartphone, I want an update, I want it. Now it happens seamlessly. I don't notice.
How can leaders then identify and nurture these, especially agile traits in these Gen Z employees?
I think we look at diversity from many aspects. That's powerful for the company.
What common mistake do leaders make when managing Gen Z?
40, 50, 60 years old don't understand the needs and the ideas of 20 something. I believe now that gap is much wider. These days, the superstars are more and more the young people who show potential. 10, 15, 20 years of career ahead of us, who have not yet demonstrated, but they can be developed to become the next star. If someone leaves work sharp at the end of their shift, it's not because they are disengaged or disrespectful. They just believe in a different type of life.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Curious Chronicles podcast. This is your host Rohit Gautam, and I'm here with a new guest, and he's my friend. His name is Francesco Bianchi. I call him Frankie, and we're going to talk about a different topic today, Gen Z and a leadership wake-up call. What we need to do as leaders for Gen Z. So let's talk about with Frankie. But before we start the episode, I would like to thank Abhyuday Global Coach Circle for their support. And if you are looking to get into professional coaching, please do check out their upcoming programs. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, please click the subscribe button and press the bell icon so you can get updates. So without further ado, let's crack on with today's episode. Welcome, Frankie. Welcome to Curious Chronicles podcast. How are you?
Very well, thank you, my friend. Very, very well. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. Always good to see you. So I'm always good whenever I speak to you and when I see you smiling like this and making my day as well, my evening as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining this space, and a very interesting topic we have chosen today to talk about. But before we start onto the topic, I would like you to please introduce yourself, where you are today. I've done a little bit of your intro, but I would like to know where you are today, what you're doing today, so the audience can connect with you.
With pleasure. I am in my office, as you can possibly tell from my background. My office is based in Dublin. I moved in Ireland 10 years ago, but I'm not exactly Irish, and as people may probably pick from my accent, which has stayed, I'm originally from Italy, northeast part, small lovely city called Trieste. Moved here as a software developer, then I discovered agility and later on coaching. So I went through the arc of developing software first, then people, now organization. And I like to go by the name or job title of organizational alchemist these days.
Brilliant. Yeah, so this is why we are here today, Frankie. It's an interesting topic, Gen Z. Can you elaborate your theory about Gen Z and their inherent agile traits, which we were talking about earlier?
A pleasure. So I think there are certain things that are facts. They're not all even a theory anymore. There's a cyclic problem with new generation entering the workforce. I found traces in ancient Roman and Greek scripts of people around our age or older complaining about the new generation changing everything, not having all the possible misbehaviors than someone can possibly imagine or even not think about. Yet I think that this time it's worse. There are a lot of reports of Gen Z being laid off. I've seen signs of what I call reverse ageism, where people our age are probably feeling concerned about the situation of the world of the marketplace, and have noticed in places where things should have been safe, them standing up and having quite negative, strongly negative words about the new generation coming in, as because they were perceived as a threat. And we read about reports of almost daily now of new managers feeling concerned about hiring new people. And I think this is concerning, very, very concerning, especially because, as you alluded to, I believe that Gen Z embodies the Agile principles, the deepest Agile principles that people like you and I have been trying to bring in organization for 10 or 20 years, other people who have started earlier than we did. And I think the new generation bring those values naturally. They embody them. They are more Agile than we could ever hope to be because they've been brought up with certain values in mind. And so I see in all the current movement and wave of Agile being considered dead or a problem or companies are rejecting it, I think those values are still valid, they're still important. And rejecting at the same time people who bring them without having to do any additional effort seems scary to me. And there are other reasons to be concerned about the recent movements.
So what specific behaviors you have seen, basically, that Gen Z, you think, like you mentioned, they are more agilists rather than us. We have to study, we have to gain that skill, we have to learn that, right? So in your view, what specific behaviors are you seeing in them that makes you think they are close to agile traits?
There's something that started a few years ago, I noticed, but I didn't give it enough weight. It was so when Scrum was introduced, I think that the first iterations were the recommendation was to have iterations no longer than 3 months, and now it's no more than a month. But usually we Agilists tend to bring in a cadence of, let's have a sprint around every 2 weeks, give or take.
Yeah.
And a few years ago already, when I say few, I mean 4 or 5, I heard a lot of developers when I was transitioning, so to say, from being a developer to be a Scrum Master, a lot of developers complaining about the sprints being too long. They wanted a way to be able to deploy potentially in production daily, multiple times per day. And so there was already something that came from technical practices. New people have grown up receiving daily updates on their phone. They don't even see that they receive an update. I remember me having to confirm the first time I got a smartphone, yeah, I want an update, I want it. Now it happens seamlessly. I don't notice unless they change an icon on my screen. There are other aspects that we could start noticing. But I'd say the pace of change, interestingly, is one that comes to mind first. We are somehow, when I say we, I say traditional agilists, we are somehow slow. Or our ambition these days has decreased so that we settle for something that is slow.
You mentioned slowness, and we all know the challenges we face at the moment, like organizational structures, the practices, and I can feel the Gen Z probably quite stifled in these natural natural organizational legacy way of working and practices. So in your view, what are those actual organizational structures and practices stifling these agile tendencies in Gen Z?
I think that when you are onboarded in a company and the first thing that you are asked to do is to read through documentation to explain the agile practices, and you're given a week for onboarding because you need to read documentation, I'm like, no, we got it wrong. That was never, that's not agility, but that's the way we live it, or the way we say that's an acceptable compromise for us. But as a young person, I want to get my hands dirty and do something. I don't want to read pages and pages. It's boring. It's useless. I don't understand what they're talking about. I never worked in a team. What does it mean that I need to report? And what does it mean that I'm a level 2 or 1 or 3 or 5? And what does it mean that I need to commit to something? I don't know. I never made an estimate. Of course, I'll do my job. That's why I'm here. So there's plenty of words that don't relate, and I don't think they can understand most of those, again, because they've never worked in a team. There are a lot of things like if you are in the software space, that's, again, where I have most of my background. If I ask you to share your code, you've never done it. Probably in school, and no one taught me. I had to go in a team and suffer for a few months before I could get used to certain basic common standards. So I think that's already a big inhibitor, I think, and that sets the scene for whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm. And that got me thinking, actually. Like you said, like onboarding processes are quite stale, quite, they stifle into it. Sometimes it take ages, and Gen Z kind of life, like where they are, they want to just get on with the job as soon as possible before, reading those big documents. They want to do that. They want to learn on the job as well, right? So do you think there will be some potential consequences that leader needs to be aware of that? How to onboard or how to actually bring them on in their organizational journey?
I think you are 100% spot on. That's a critical topic that I think many leaders are ignoring. I don't think anyone is blind to it, but I think they are deliberately ignoring, thinking, oh, this is a smaller problem that I can address later on, which maybe in a moment of complete crisis is okay, but we are already starting to see the impact, and I think we'll see it fully in about 5 years' time if we don't change course of action. Whenever we are laying off young people, we are impacting. Whenever someone is laid off, we're impacting severely their confidence. Whenever we write on social media, and the online magazines are quite horrible in this, that this certain category is bad, they are misbehaving, they are not acting correctly, we are undermining their confidence. And right now we are avoiding altogether to hire people. There's some companies who, because of AI, because of other reasons, because of the generational gap, they are not hiring new people anymore. So we have a growing generation of people who have passion. They are building their confidence, their sense of self. We are undermining that. We are not giving them a job, so that we increase the dependency from their family. And so as human beings, they're not maturing. We're contributing to what we are complaining about, that they are not mature enough. And shortly, as the population, the company population will be aging, we'll have less and less energy, and gradually less and less people able to change, innovate in the historical moment where change is the most required ability to change and adapt is the most required skill that we've ever had. And frankly, at a certain point, when we'll all want to retire, and there's not going to be anyone working, and in the meanwhile, these people will have spent 3, 4, 5 years not finding a job. They will need to keep entertaining themselves, entertained in some other ways. That's going to be a big problem. There are explosions of baby gangs movements in the street. I'm not saying that is connected, but maybe. And there's a problem with people, younger people, sustaining the elderly. We're not building toward that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking, because how we, for example, I'm thinking as a football manager example, right? We all follow football. You're from Italy, and I know I came from India, but started following football here since I came here. You know how managers or they were leaders, they were bosses, and how they used to treat the old generation players, and how they used to treat the new generation, the middle generation in between, and now is totally different, right? Mm-hmm. I remember I was reading Sir Alex biography. I mean, he mentioned he used to shout at players. They may still shout, but they can't just do what they used to do earlier. So the Gen Z nowadays, the newborn players, it impact them totally differently than it used to be probably our end, right? I know my parents used to, I shouldn't say it on the podcast, but they were very strict. but nowadays, it's really hard to be strict with kids these days.
It is, and I'm not sure it's an entirely bad thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
probably
yeah,
at the same time it adds complexity. It's not
mm,
anymore so easy to shout to someone. We
exactly.
need to, as leaders, we need to develop new ways of leading.
Mm,
We need to remove. I love that this new generation is bringing in the new challenge. They are forcing what we as agile coaches have been trying to explain and to change for years. They are forcing a situation where the employees need to be treated as human beings, and we
100%.
leaders need to lead by influence and through coaching and mentoring and role modeling, not through a commanding and dictatorship style.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. And I do see this. I think what we are trying to say is the more of that coaching, more of that mentoring, 100% role modeling we're talking about. But there will be certain points where they still need to command and control, but that'll be very, very less today's day and age, rather than, earlier where the 100% they used to just, hey, here's the thing,
yes,
you need to do it this way. So
100% is the ability to change
change.
stance.
Yeah, yeah,
It's sometimes in times of crisis, there are certain moments where it's absolutely uh, fundamental that a lead takes charge and leads. When you need to set a vision, when you need to get out of an impasse of a situation of stasis, and someone needs to take a decision, and the leader needs to take on the responsibility to say, "I'm gonna call this shot." If it's not a bad metaphor, I'm gonna decide and take responsibility for whatever are the consequences. And that's a good thing because that helps. We've seen in all the companies with a strong CEO, strong leaders, they move at a different pace than other companies.
yeah,
But then you also need to create the space for the rest of the organization to do their job and feeling empowered of doing their job.
yeah,
And I love that you brought in the analogy with football. Um, I think you're right, and we can see with the numbers. The numbers don't lie. In the past, the highest the salary was going to the top star, even if they were during at the end of their career.
yeah.
Now these days the superstars are more and more the young people who show potential, who have 10, 15, 20 years of career ahead of us, who have
Yeah.
not yet demonstrated, but they can be developed to become the next star.
Yeah, actually, very good point, Frankie. Very, very good point. And this is where we see the change, right? This is where leaders need to adopt. That's why the wake up call is that you can't just use the old ways of working. So that reminded me, guys, if you haven't watched the previous episode, it's on adaptive leadership. This is what we're talking about today. So please watch out on the last episode as well. I will put a link somewhere here on the card. So Frankie, moving forward, I want to see then how can leaders say, obviously, like we mentioned, leaders need to be adaptive, leaders need to change their traits. How can leaders then identify and nurture these, especially agile traits in these Gen Z employees?
I love your question, and I think it's just a coincidence that it arrives in a moment where, at least in the US, but probably the rest of the world will follow suit, we are removing companies, not we, but companies are canceling their D&I initiatives. I think we look at diversity from many aspects. That's powerful for the company. One aspect that we don't look at, in my experience, with enough care, is about age difference. So in a meeting, but not as a participant, as a spectator, not as a spectator, in a meeting, in a decision-making process, I would like to have the experienced person with the authority, the CEO. I want to have an SME who doesn't have an important role, as in terms of authority, but who knows about the topic. And I would like to have the new hire. I would like for them to talk first, and for the leader or whoever is helping with the facilitation, here it's helpful to have a professional facilitator in the room to create the space for the young people to talk first, making them feel empowered, making them feel part of the process. It's not enough to hire them so that they do photocopies, so they become apprentices who do monkey work of pressing a button while they watch over the shoulder and they try to steal the secrets of work from their more senior colleagues. They need to be part of the process from day one, before they become experienced, while they still have a fresh eye, while they still bring their genuinity.
Yeah. And we have seen that Gen Z have a lot of great ideas, right? Today's Gen Z, they just full of ideas, full of like innovation. They want to do everything really quick. So it's a great way to actually, like in Canadian, they have like tried when they do sense making. They have a tried, like we say, with senior person, junior person, and then they all get together and then come out. Similar thing you mentioned here. So how can then leaders then create that environment for this to prosper?
I think the answer is almost always, if you want to change, this is about changing culture.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want to change the culture, you need to embody the culture. You need to demonstrate it. So the next time you have a call, instead of bringing in your C-1 and all the panel is C-1, ask a young person to join you on the panel. Every single time I go to town halls, with a few exceptions that have been refreshing, and those companies are making a difference. But most of the time, when I go to panels, you see the more experienced people in the organization that you want to look up at. They become so these demigods that have the power of your life, and that already sets a certain mindset of knowing at a certain point, if I behave well enough, I'll get to that point. And as a young person, you feel intimidated. You feel you cannot necessarily speak. You have no authority. Well, if from the get-go, in every single iteration, as a CEO, as a CTO, as a CIO, or the person immediately reporting into them, under them in the hierarchy, I brought on stage consistently an intern, a new hire, a graduate, and ask their opinion. How are you going through things? What are your ideas? If I ask them to facilitate a conversation, for example, there are certain things that could put them under the spotlight in a safe way for the organization. Maybe I wouldn't ask them to make a decision, the final decision on where to spend all the budget of the company, but having them being part of the conversation on where that's decided, and they become one vote, at least one voice, but ideally one vote at the end, they would make a huge difference. Because the company goes where the lead goes. That's our role as leader, is to lead the company. And I believe it happens by walking before our people, embracing them and bringing them with us, but being one step ahead of them and say, I'm going that way, come with me.
Yeah, great point, Frankie. Great point. So let's move to a little bit of like managing, because the leader's role is not lead as well. At some time, they have to manage as well, right? So, what do you think, in your view, and theory you were mentioning, what common mistake do leaders make when actually managing Gen Z?
I think, so as mentioned at the beginning, there's a cyclic thing where 40, 50, 60 years old don't understand the needs and the ideas of 20 something. I believe now that gap is much wider. I think first we need to acknowledge that and accept that and say, I need to remember how it was when I was 20 something, when I started my career. That's the first thing, which most of us have forgot. Second is, even if I remember how big was the gap, now it's much wider. And so that puts me in a position where I need to accept that I don't know. So let me ask. It's about relearning, accepting that you need to relearn ways of managing, because the way we have been managed is not the same that the new younger generation need. It's about understanding what are their values, and so how I can motivate them, in what ways it's safe to, I don't want to say punish them, but somehow to not encourage certain behaviors, or maybe to call out certain behaviors that are negative. Because Gen Zs are young and are thinking in a different way, but they're not idiots. And they can understand if they've done something wrong. What they cannot accept is to be insulted for that. Because I believe they have a much better self-awareness and awareness of their self-worth. Just not accepting the type of compromise, which people of my age, but definitely my parents, have been used to. You are my boss, you shout on me. That's absolutely acceptable. We want to understand why they behave in a certain way. And so all of a sudden, through understanding, we can change our evaluation of certain behaviors. So that if someone leaves work sharp at the end of their shift, it's not because they are disengaged or disrespectful. They just believe in a different type of life, which, if you ask me, it's healthy. We should learn from them.
We should definitely, yeah. We should definitely learn from that. See, yeah, so they're really great point actually. When you're mentioning regarding the failures, this is what agile kind of way we say. It's not a failure, right? It's a learning. So they don't take it as a failure; they take it as a learning. So they want to improve rather than saying, "Oh, I failed," or "I made a mistake." It's not a mistake. I learned.
Absolutely, and especially I think that they're more used than we were with prototyping and creating a company. Like honestly, creating a company in a week without resources is much more normal now. Creating your own business, there's much more entrepreneurial approach. So their mind is also generally, it's more used to say, I'm autonomous. I want to be autonomous from day one. I cannot wait 20 years before I can take a decision. I need to take a decision now. Otherwise, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can take it. And failures, yes, there's the approach of let me try, and if it doesn't work, I can move on. But the moment I perceived judgment, I'm probably now not equipped because of the way I've been brought up to cope with it from a confidence perspective. So
Yep.
blaming them, thank you, blaming them and making them feel that they are wrong, that may inhibit them, and that can lead to the type of paralysis that big old-fashioned companies that we have today live, where they are scared to take any decision, and so you have an entire committee who talks about doing something for 6 months. That's a huge waste of money, opportunity, and honestly of people happiness, because no one is happy during those events.
Yeah, definitely. So let's move on to us, right? Older generations. so so how can we as older generation, I know I'm calling it us like we older generation, but but how can older generation learn and adopt to the agile mindset of Gen Z?
I'm going to repeat myself, but in a good way, meaning I think there are a few principles, but just adopting those 2-3 principles, we can solve almost all the problems that we have. Of course, I'm oversimplifying, but somehow, from what is our perspective, is I didn't mention, I should have mentioned, learning to be compassionate. That's something that we need to do to be able to do our job better, and for ourselves, simply to learn that there's a different model. Now, these days, since I decided to focus, I noticed the problem with Gen Z. I decided to shift my career in trying to help with that. I started interviewing a lot of Gen Z people who have just joined the world of work or are trying to join the world of work. So in a very specific part of their career, the early years. And just by talking to them, I started changing my own life. So I am more mindful. I am taking more time for myself. It's a silly thing, but I'm drinking more water. I'm taking care of me in that sense. I've changed my diet without anyone pointing out, oh, you should change your diet. I said, I think that my body needs something different. In the past, I would have just powered through. So I need to close this stuff. I can sleep an hour less, I can skip lunch, or I can have a unhealthy lunch just because it's fast. Now I feel there's something really important that someone said, a couple of them said, that resonated and is starting to produce effects, which is, I don't want to turn out like my parents who come back from work too tired to stay with the family. And when you start hearing it consistently from 1, 2, 3 people, start thinking maybe there's something in that. And I started paying attention at how many times I get home and I'm upset, I don't have patience. So just, I would say, talking to them, spending the time, investing the time in talking to them and noticing what are the things that they bring to the table that sounds different and can resonate with us. And if it sounds wrong, maybe challenging ourselves and saying, is it really wrong? Or is it just different?
Yeah. And I'm it's making me think once again, in a podcast. This is why I love doing podcasts, so I learn a lot, and then it makes me think. So things change, right? Generations change, and this is such a generation we never faced before. The challenges, right? So sometimes they say, oh, it's the same challenge previous generation, but this is totally different. This is totally different, and the way technology is going as well. So what do you think then? What role technology can play here with leaders helping Gen Z or Gen Z helping leaders?
I think that's an exceptional question. I think you found exactly why the main reason why this generation is so different, or is the first to be so different. The next one is going to be maybe as different as, let's say. Yeah. And Gen Beta, who started technically, if you go by the started 1st of January this year, is going to be even different because they're born with AI out there. But anyway, going back to Gen Z, let's talk about the old.
Keep it Gen Z.
Yeah, so people are already ready to work. So saying technology, they are now aware about what's going on. They are aware of all the salaries that they can get in this or that job, so they can make comparison. They can make their own mind. They can build their own judgment. They know how to answer. They know how to get prepared. And I think leaders should learn to look at the world in the same way. Through technology, they can connect with people. They can observe them accessing new social media platform. They can reach out to a gazillion of people. I was impressed when I started posting reviews on Google Maps. Now I have about almost 20 million views of people who look at the food that I've eaten. And I'm on LinkedIn trying to get, a couple of clicks here and there. And the scale is completely different. The influence I'm having on Google Maps, and no one knows who I am, but indirectly I can have. But also, I can amplify the voice of someone. Imagine being a CEO today who's having a town hall with 100,000 employees connected online. And I can bring on stage a young person. How much visibility all of a sudden am I giving to that person? Who is in a phase of their career where they feel completely unseen. And with remote work, it's even more so because they don't see anyone. And all of a sudden, I can make them become the most known person in the company for a week. And if I do that every week with a different person, what kind of culture can I do? What can I create? What kind of impact can I bring to my organization? It doesn't take much.
Yeah. Brilliant conversation, Frankie. Brilliant. So unfortunately, we're at the end of this because it was a short episode on Gen Z. So before we go, I will request you to I'll ask all my guests. So what one advice would you give to the leaders today? Just one. You're thinking that's the most important advice to the leaders regarding Gen Z.
It's more an encouragement or an invitation than an advice. I try to live by it now, and I encourage them to try it out. It's every single time you think, this is not working, I need to fix them, think about what you can fix in yourself instead.
Brilliant advice. Thank you very much, Frankie. Thanks a lot for your time and having this great conversation. It's a different conversation, but I really loved it. I hope you loved it as well. And I hope, audience, when you're watching this, you loved it as well. And then please comment what you think Gen Z are about. What do you think where the future is going with technology, with leadership, and how leaders managing and leading Gen Z. So by this, I want to end the call. And thank you very much for your time, Frankie, once again. And audience, thanks very much for watching. I'll be back soon with a new episode. Till then, take care. Bye for now.